At its heart, D&D is simply a rule system that allows a group of people to get together and play make-believe together and tell a story. There's often role-playing, investigations, political intrigue, and there's usually combat. One person, known as the Game Master or Dungeon Master, GM or DM respectively, they'll lead a group of one or more players through an adventure. The DM will typically begin by describing a scene or a place that has the player characters in it. And then they'll ask the players what they'd like to do. For example, the DM might say, it's late at night, and you're walking through the woods down a narrow path. You see a cabin about 50 feet ahead, a warm flickering light shining from the windows, just barely visible through the trees. What would you like to do? And then the players tell the DM what they would like to say or do. The DM might make the players roll some dice to determine how well they accomplish their goal, and then the DM will describe what happens next based on the results of those rolls. The play cycle continues like that, with players interacting with the world. The DM plays the part of the world as well as all of the non-player characters in the world. The DM is the arbiter of the rules and also often acts as a resource to help players remember those rules and to determine when those rules may or may not apply. I usually recommend that players base their first characters off of a character that they know from a story or a movie or a book that they like. For example, you could be a child prodigy wizard whose parents were killed when you were young by a great and powerful evil wizard. You grew up with your aunt and uncle who were stuck with the task, and they didn't care much for you. You left home as soon as you could, and you found shelter with a family of one of your friends from school. The attack on your parents left you scarred, and now you travel the world seeking powerful magics to revenge your parents and put an end to the evil that has ruined your life. My only rule for character creation is that you should make a character that's going to want to play with the rest of the party. D&D is a team game, and doing things like robbing the rest of the party in the middle of the night and poisoning their ale or stabbing them in the back because it's what your character would do, it's not really fun for anybody else. It won't be tolerated in my games. Sorry. Do yourself and everyone else in the party a favor and just build a character that's going to want to work with the rest of the party, and we'll have a really fun time. Once you have your character, there's a few things that you should familiarize yourself with regarding your character sheet. For starters, your character is going to have 6 different ability scores on a scale of 0 to 20, with 10 being the average, although we wouldn't be telling a very good story if all of the characters were simply average. So in general, most of your scores will be above 10. These ability scores are going to translate into modifiers. A score of 10 is just a flat 0. There's no modifier. And the modifiers go up or down on even numbers. So a 12 gives you +1, 14 gives you +2, 16 is +3, and so on and so forth, all the way up to 20, and even above in some cases. And then below 10 gives you a minus modifier. So 8 is a -1, 6 is a -2, and so on and so forth, down to 0. As for the specific ability scores, strength is pretty self-explanatory. It makes you physically strong. It affects things like how well you can climb, how far you can jump. It also affects your damage with weapons like hammers and maces and longswords, things like that. Dexterity is all about being nimble and sneaky. It affects things like picking pockets and picking locks. But it also impacts how much damage you do with finesse weapons like rapiers and ranged weapons like crossbows or even thrown objects. Constitution is more about toughness instead of strength. Being able to take a punch without falling down or resist the effects of a poison are Constitution. It also affects how many hit points your character might have. Intelligence is book smarts, knowledge of history, magic, religion, nature. These are all things affected by your intelligence. It's stuff that you know. And it also affects how much damage wizards do with their spells. Wisdom, on the other hand, is street smarts as opposed to book smarts. So wisdom is being able to tell if you're being watched, being able to tell if somebody's lying to you. Things like that fall under wisdom. Folks with high wisdom are also much more aware of their surroundings. They kind of know what's going on around them a little bit better. And wisdom will influence spellcasting for druids as well as clerics. Finally, there's charisma. Charisma is not only how charming you are, how well you can persuade somebody, or how convincingly you can lie, but it also affects spellcasting for several classes, like sorcerers and warlocks and bards. Now, in addition to your ability score, you may become proficient in different skills. These skills are based on your ability scores, but you may have additional proficiency. So, for example, if your rogue is proficient in stealth, not only will you add your dexterity modifier, but you'll also add your proficiency modifier to stealth checks. Or perhaps your bard is proficient in performance, so you'll add your charisma modifier as well as your proficiency modifier to any performance checks that you have to make. Saving throws are how well you're going to react to stopping bad things to happen to you. Trying to avoid the effects of a trap that you triggered might be a dexterity saving throw. If you step in a snare trap and you want to roll out of the way before it catches your leg, you make a dexterity saving throw. Resisting the effects of a poison that you've consumed, or fighting off exhaustion after going all night without sleep, or marching hard through the day, might be a constitution saving throw. At some point in the adventure, you'll likely hear the famous words, roll initiative. If things get heated in battle, we're going to enter a turn-based combat system known as initiative. You'll roll a d20 and add your initiative modifier to see what order you go in. Once we're in initiative, on your turn, you can do a few different things. You can move up to your character's movement. You can take an action and a bonus action. Different characters are going to have different actions and bonus actions that they can take depending on what class they are. Some spells are actions and some are bonus actions, for example. And then you can always say something brief, like you can just shout out a warning to your team or something like that. And you can always interact with the environment as sort of a free interaction. If there's a lever that you want to throw or something like that, that's a free action, opening doors and stuff like that. If you attack someone, you're going to make an attack roll with your spell or your weapon attack modifier. And if your attack roll meets or beats the enemy's armor class, you hit them, and then you'll roll for damage. Similarly, enemies need to meet or beat your armor class in order to strike you in combat, and then they'll roll for damage, which will be subtracted from your hit points. Once you have your character, feel free to make it your own. You'll be able to keep this character after the adventure, so if you ever play Dungeons & Dragons again, you can use this character. You should give your character a name and spend a bit of time filling out the description information, the physical appearance, the personality traits. Again, it might help you to base your character off of a character that you already know. That way, if you're in a role-playing situation, you'll have a pretty good idea of how they're going to react. Otherwise, if you've just got a really good idea in mind, feel free to make it up. That's what D&D is all about.